Because you're out there, all right, here we go.
Good morning. Today is the 6th of June, 2023. You're listening to Body Talk on the No Sack Radio Network. Again, good morning. I hope everyone had a great, fun, safe, and super fantastic weekend. First and foremost, let's continue to celebrate Black history every day throughout the year. Body Talk is a program for your mind, body, and soul. Today we have the world famous, world known Body Talk Power Panel. And we have some excellent panelists this morning. I'm going to start with the ladies first. To my right, we have Carlee, and she is a host or co-host, on the Entertainment Plug that airs from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. every Saturday. To her right, we have Miss Coffee. She's the host and creator of Motor Mind Day Monday, and that airs from 11 to 1 p.m. To my immediate left, we have Jeff Doggett, better known as Pastor Doggett. He has a show on the network that airs Saturday from 3 to 5 p.m. titled The Right Side. And the gentleman to Pastor Doggett's left is James. He's the other co-host from the Entertainment Plug that airs Saturday from 11 to 1 p.m.
Since you call me pastor, I'm going to be on my best behavior today.
That's why I called you Pastor, Jeff. The other thing before we get started on the topics of the power panel, just want to do a brief and a quick important read. This is for a young lady by the name of Ayl Brown. She was shot in her head at 2 years old, 7 years ago, so today she's 9 years old. The bullet destroyed her brain and her skull. She became paralyzed for life. Last week, someone stole the vehicle that had Ayla's customized motorized wheelchair and stroller in it. I'm asking you to assist Ayla and her family by donating whatever amount of money that you can to afford to assist Ayla to purchase a new wheelchair and stroller. If you're not familiar with people who are paralyzed for life, it's difficult to carry individuals such as that. She's a small, tiny girl, but this is their mode of transportation. I'm going to give you a GoFundMe address. The GoFundMe address is gofundme.me/50small d077f3. Let me repeat that again. GoFundMe.me/50small d077f3. Whatever you can afford, it doesn't matter if you just donate $1, $100, or $1,000. I'm also asking the corporations and businesses out here, such as O'Reilly's, Macy's, Target, and all the car dealers in and around Greater Cleveland, if not the country, to donate to this young lady so that she can have transportation again. So let's just get right to the topics here, and let me do a disclaimer. Everybody on this panel is just brilliant. They're excellent. They're very smart. They're articulate, and their opinions are their opinions, and not the stations, not No Static Radio. And again, you're listening to Body Talk on the No Static Radio Network. If you have a question and or a comment, you can call area code 216-939-5087, or you can email your question or comment directly to bodytalkradioprogram@gmail.com. The first topic we have for the power panel is character and integrity important in life, and more so for elected people? Is character and integrity important in life, and that means everybody, and more so for elected individuals? Ms. Coffee.
I'll go. I think it's very important. But I think that, uh, my thoughts are mine, and a lot of other people would think differently. I think that while character and integrity are important, I think people do what they want to do. And whatever your ambition or objective is, whatever you believe or have been told uh, is necessary or required to get in that space, that's what people will do. And they'll leave their character and integrity behind if they even have any to get there. And then some people, you realize what you've done, and when you're on the wrong train, some people get off. Some people, they keep going. And so while it's very important, I think that if you're not raised with that, I think that circumstances sometimes, if you don't have the right upbringing, if you're raised in the streets, if you're raised by people without integrity or character, then that bleeds into you. And unless you are in a situation or come in contact with people that raise that to you and and you're receptive to, understanding and getting that character and integrity, then you'll just keep forging ahead, not knowing, because it doesn't have to be intentional, um, that people at least start out without those things. And so the politicians, to say, do they have it even more so? If they were not on television all of the time, if they were not so influential, if you had more people with integrity and character that were on television all of the time, then the lack of character that we see in the politicians, to some extent, it wouldn't matter that much because we wouldn't see them as much.
And you're listening to the Body Talk Radio program on the No Static Radio Network. And before I call on James, let me add a statement here. I'm a firm believer that when everybody votes, your vote determines your character and integrity.
It's true.
Because it's true. For lack of better terms, and some people get upset when I use the term liar, but you got to call it what it is. If you know you're voting for a liar, that determines who you are.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
James, we have James from the Entertainment Plug, not Club, Entertainment Plug.
Cosign. And to add to that, I just think that, for me, it's essential. If you're running for any position in office, I think that you have to have a strong level of character and integrity. The problem is many of the people who are, in these positions, they don't have, very good character and integrity. You and I both talked about, running for city council and that sort of thing. And that, in all honesty, is the reason why I'm not involved in it.
Right.
Obviously, I didn't go through the entire process, but to me, that kind of goes back to the level of integrity that people, the powers that be had. A lot of people who are, whether they're in office or whether they're just working it, like they don't really have that. And then when you look at the voters and the constituents, a lot of them don't really have it either. So people are kind of voting for their friends, or they're voting for their family, or just because of who they are, and not necessarily their character and their integrity. And that's if they're voting at all, because we already know the situation with getting out to vote. So I do think that it's essential, but I think unless you clean up everybody, you're just not going to get that.
It has to be the standard.
Yeah, and I agree with what everybody has said. It starts at home. You listen to the Body Talk Radio program, and we have the Body Talk Power Panel. And before I call on Miss Carlee, Miss Everything, as I like to say, see,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Somebody told me to say that. The one thing, when we talk about character and integrity, granted it does start at home, how you were raised. What's surprising, and we can isolate it to some local level. If we want to say Cleveland, it could be Chicago, it could be New York, or whatever the case might be. I think what happens here, people do vote uninformed.
Right.
That's true. And in my assessment, there's two levels of voting, or two types of voters. You have the emotional voter, and James, you hit it on the head. I'm gonna vote for whoever because he or she lived next door, they dated my 15th cousin, or whatever the case might be. They might have been on my basketball, football team in high school or even in college. And then you have what I consider the most important voters, the intellectual voter. That doesn't mean you have to have some fancy degree or even a college degree. It just means you do your research, you listen to the candidates and understand what they're saying. So let me go to the pastor. Pastor Jeff, what's your opinion on character and integrity, especially at the elected person level?
Okay, first I'll talk about it individually, and then we'll deal with it in leadership, not just in politics, but leadership, period. Character is what you do when people aren't looking.
Absolutely.
And, you have a choice, regardless of the environment that you were brought up in. You have a choice as to whether or not, as an individual, you're going to develop character, you're going to operate with character and integrity. And not to preach here and go too biblical here, but
Okay.
That's
But-
what you're here for. I
but
got the rest of us to do the other part.
we'll take the collection and the benediction later. But
Yes.
leadership, the scripture says, to whom much is given, whom much is required.
Exactly.
And so when you are in leadership, you are held to a higher standard. Not saying that those who aren't in leadership don't have standards, because you have standards, because there's no such thing as a lack of standard. You're either going to have a high standard or low standard, but it's going to be standard. So, but when you step up, whether it be a teacher, a pastor, a mayor, governor, whatever the case may be, in leadership, you are held to a higher accountability because you are responsible for those that you are pastoring or leading or teaching, etc. And so there's no such thing as my public persona and then my private persona. If I lack character when no one is looking, eventually that's going to be exposed. So character is of the utmost importance. And to your point, Coffee, what you were saying a few moments ago about how people, and you're right, people will sometimes sell out in order to get in a certain position or a certain elected office, whatever the case may be. However, again, Scripture says, what does it profit a man, a meaning person, to gain the whole world and lose their soul? And what will you give in exchange for your soul? Because at the end of the day, you're going to one day have to give an account. And, if you're on the wrong side of the ledger, then there's consequences for that as well. So, you have to ask yourself, what is more important to me? Gaining this position, gaining this prestige, or whatever it is, or keeping my integrity, keeping my character, not losing my soul.
And you listen to the Body Talk Radio program, and we are having the Body Talk Power Panel on the No Stack Radio Network. If you have any questions or comments, you can call area code 216-939-5087. And we have, again, to my right, Miss Carlee, better known as Miss Everything. We have Miss Coffee. We have Pastor Doggett to my left, and to my far left, we have James. Miss Everything,
Okay.
what's your comment on character and integrity?
Absolutely. See, now I have to make sure I write that in if I fell in love with Carlee. Now it's Miss Everything, so I won't forget. So, good morning, you guys. As far as I'm concerned, when it comes to integrity, if you have integrity, it should be impossible to lose it. Now you can fake it, like you say, fake it till you make it. You can fake integrity, but when you're in a situation like Pastor just said, it's what you do behind closed doors. So if you are that person behind closed doors and you come outside and all of a sudden you just lose it, that is something wrong. That's not integrity. You're being a people pleaser. Be who you are. I do believe that people can gain integrity. They can learn something throughout life. I mean, if they have been brought up in a household of people who lack integrity, they absolutely can do soul searching along the way and pick up this characteristic along the way and continue to move forth in that particular likeness. You know, yeah, there's no checking it at the door. It is definitely who you are. I can't take Carlee off and leave her outside and then come back, you know, and become somebody else.
Well, what's interesting, and all of you, what you said, I agree with. And the pastor mentioned the word leadership. And let's bounce this around for a minute. Just because you hold an elected office or elective office, that doesn't make you a leader.
And I think our answers to, you know, our responses are in a perfect world. So that's the first thing. So in a perfect world, people should have character and integrity, and especially when you have it, you go about the world expecting others to have it. But I think we don't live in a perfect world. And I think that as humans, we all are complicated. And like you're saying, if you don't have it, you can learn to have it. But, and like you started out saying, Al, yeah, the elected leaders, one, I don't even like when people call them leaders. I don't even like when they call these people, you know, still give you the honor of President Al. You know, but it's so easy to call people struggling on the streets who don't really know any better, thugs, criminals. They call them what they are, what they believe they are. But then we have this constant, you know, we're going to give you this designation whether or not, you know, you are a leader, and whether or not you actually perform as a leader. And people don't put them in positions to have character or integrity. They hire them, however they get in these offices and these positions, because there's two things going on, and two things I believe. There's two things rich people don't have enough of: money and power. And they put them in there to do what they don't want to be the face of seeing as having been done. So the person isn't in there to lead the country. They're in there to achieve this objective of the people who put them in there. So yeah, a leader now, as a parent, you are a leader. As an older sister, you are a leader. As an elder in your family, you are a leader. You know, no one elected you to be that. So in that regard, to me, leaders are expected to lead.
And see, that's interesting. Excuse me, Jeff, Pastor, excuse me, Pastor.
Jeff is fine.
Oh, okay, Pastor.
We
I'm
let
like,
him off the hook.
Don't let him off the hook. See, you utilize an interesting term, hire. When people go to the polls to vote, you literally are hiring somebody for 4 years. And all politics aside, being party, we can use Richard Nixon's classic example. You know, he got caught up in Watergate, and that's been proven. And so have other individuals at the state, local levels been caught up in something. Now, the one thing, you can learn certain aspects of integrity along the way. And I somewhat, when I say this, I struggle not with those two variables. When a person raises his or her right hand to take an oath, they're basically standing up their line.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they pretty much are, and
they know it.
And it still goes back to the standard.
Right.
It still goes back to the standard that's being set, and they can learn it along the way, but that's if they want to learn it.
Right.
But if they're coming in the door and they're not being held to that standard by the people who are there, like you need the proper people at the top who are going to vet them the right way and make sure that they are who they say that they are. Just like the FBI, if you want to work for the FBI or whatever, they go and talk to everybody you could have ever known in your life.
Yeah, they find people you didn't know.
Right.
And they talk to them. And you're listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static Radio Network, and we have the Body Talk Power Band. And see, James, that's interesting that you mentioned FBI and.
Well, I only know that because I have a sibling who works.
Right.
And
they do. Same thing with the Internal Revenue Service, any federal law enforcement agency. They find your third grade teacher in the cemetery.
Right.
And they go talk to him or her. But what's interesting here is going back to Ms. Coffey, she used that fancy term hire. You're hired by voting.
Mhm.
So if this society or community or country is dissatisfied, why would you hire that person again?
Absolutely.
So let me just speak to a couple of things. I'm gonna say, first of all, when you say when they take that oath, they're lying. That's a broad assumption to make because what you're saying is that no matter who it is, when they take that oath of office, they don't really mean what they're saying. And I'm going to push back on that because we don't know. When you see the results of their tenure or term, whatever it may be, then you can make that judgment. But to say, once they take that oath, whatever it is, that they're automatically lying, I'm going to push back on that.
Right.
The other thing I'm going to push back on is that whether you see yourself as a leader or not, when you are elected to an office, you are elected to leadership. Now, one thing about leadership that we don't hear a lot of talk about is that every leader is a learner. The moment you stop learning is the moment you stop leading. You never will get it all. So once you get to the point in leadership where you think you know it all and you got it all and nobody can tell you anything and you can't learn anything, that is a sign that it's time for you to get out. Either you get voted out, you step down if you have the integrity and character to do that. But I can't, because only that person and God knows what's truly in that person's heart, whether they really mean what they say when they put their hand on the Bible and take that oath of office. That's similar to when when a couple stands before you and takes the vows. You have to assume that they mean what they're saying, and that's a whole nother time. I want to go down that rabbit hole, but that's why before anybody get married, just throw this commercial in real quick, you need to have at least 2, possibly 3 very intense premarital counseling sessions before you get ready to go down that aisle, but that's a whole different topic. I won't go there, but just throwing that out there.
Right.
Well, Pastor Jeff, I'm going to take your shove instead of the pushback. I should have qualified and said some people, because I think some people go into office with malfeasance on their mind.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Which is technically in your heart. And when I say the oath, I don't know if anybody around this table has ever taken any oath to serve. And when you do that, some, emphasizing some, that's S-O-M-E, not S-U-M, some take it seriously, very seriously. And again, I don't want to get into names because we'll probably be here for the next 6 weeks. James is biting at the bit here. See, one of the things I think that's important, especially when, as voters, be careful who you vote for. And we're not careful.
That's true.
And Ms. Coffey and I think Carlee probably said it differently. You learn along the way.
Absolutely.
A thief is a thief is a thief.
Right.
Period. Yes, it is.
Right.
A liar is a liar is a liar.
Period.
And can you unchange that?
Right.
Well, I don't know if anybody.
Yes, you can.
Well, you
but
can.
That takes.
But you do. The damage is already done.
Right.
The damage is done. I'm sorry, John.
Oh no, it's okay.
No, go ahead. No, let's see.
No,
It's your show.
I mean just. I just think no. Speaking of what you said, I think it just, and I mean we said this, but it really goes back to how the voters were brought up and what's okay to them and what's not okay to them, and what they accept versus what they don't accept, and whether they like the person. A lot of people. I mean, you can take it back to the presidential race. A lot of people vote for one person just because they don't like the color of the other person, or they don't like, or so. It's a lot that goes into it, and just like he was saying, it is a broad assumption to say that everybody is just going in with malfeasance. But you get a lot of people who are going in that way, but then you also get people who go in and they have the best intentions, and because of how it is in there already, and as they present things, they can't get them passed or they can't get certain stuff done because You know, a lot of people, they end up turning bad because.
And James, and again, you brought up some interesting topics there. See, one thing that, and I was trained as an arbitrator and mediator, okay? And that was probably the best education I ever had because it teaches you to listen.
Oh, yeah.
And most people don't listen.
What do they really want? You
Yeah.
gotta know what the people really want to help them to the end.
Well, even as a prospective voter, they don't listen to
Yep.
so-called candidates. You know, people can walk around and let's say knock on your door and say, you know what I really want, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate? I want a stop sign at the end of my driveway. And that candidate say, sure, I'll do that for you. So you go to the polls on whatever day, November 2nd and 3rd, and check. And you wait 3 weeks, 3 months, and Mr. Elected or Mrs. Elected person now, you said you're gonna put a stop sign at the end of my driveway. I get to it, or I just said that so you vote for me. See, one of the things that we don't do, and some people I've spoken to over time said we should bring back civics education in schools. And I think that's a good idea. But one of the things I think most of us have passed kindergarten, maybe the first grade at least, the one thing I remember my teacher always saying is listen. We don't listen anymore. We hear, but we don't listen.
And I think another issue, and I'm thinking of it as you're talking, Al, is, again, everything to me has to start with the family. Because of the way I was raised, that's always going to be the perspective I have. So, and then, for whatever reason, I just think when the lady that bought the hot coffee and was allowed to sue McDonald's, when she was allowed to win that suit, we basically turned everything from individual responsibility outward. And we blamed everyone. So the schools and the teachers, whether it's their responsibility or not, whether it's their job or not, whether they're doing it or not, as a parent, if I see that my kids are not learning and not understanding politics and, what age to vote and who to vote for and why, it's my responsibility to step in and do that. And I think we've taken so much and put it outward and expect other people to do it. And then when they don't do it, then we look like, well, it has to start at home, in the community, in an environment that you're raised in, that you grow up in, that you know and you trust. Because when you have that, when it starts at the family, and then people say, well, where did you learn that out? Well, my mom taught me that, or my dad, or my aunt, or my uncle taught me that. Then that gets the younger people to going and saying, well, let me talk to my mom or dad, or if they're not interested in that, well, let me hang with Al more. But when all you have is, and then when we get where we have, television is a fallacy anyway. Yeah. I mean, right? It's basically synonymous with, the idiot box. So why are we listening to and watching that for this kind of important information? And so it's self-study that you have to learn, and you have to learn and have the discipline to do. You have to want to know who you're going to vote for, and that we can hold them accountable. Like what would you have right over there, sitting there? It was earlier, the Constitution. How many people have read that and know what that means? The Second Amendment, I had a right to bear arms. Do you really know what that means? Do you really understand that the Supreme Court is the one, even though what's ever written on those pages, the Supreme Court's interprets it the way that they want to? And so now that trumps what's even in the written document. And so I think that we started in the late 80s or 90s or whatever point that was, we look outward and we blame everyone in society. We have all of these excuses for not having self and individual responsibility and accountability.
Coffee, so I'm sorry.
Oh, Pastor, I was getting ready to introduce you, but go ahead, Pastor. Step on your line.
I'm sorry, you said a mouthful there.
And trigger word family.
So much to respond to, and I'll start from the end and work back to the beginning. You're so right. The Constitution, most people don't know. Most people don't know that we have a bicameral form of government. Most people don't know what it takes for a law to come into being. That has to be introduced in the House, be passed in the Senate, and the president can sign it or they can veto it. And then if it's vetoed, then the Senate can override the veto. So that goes back to education in basic civics education, which is what we do need in the the schools should be responsible for that. But you are in my wheelhouse right now. We talk about the family, specifically when it comes to the black family. Again, I'm going to do this, but again, in the scripture, in the very last book of the Old Testament, in Malachi, before God went silent for 400 years, the very last thing that was said, it says, in the last day I will send my prophet in the spirit of Elijah. He will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the children to the fathers, lest I strike the land with a curse. What is he saying here? What he's saying is that family is important. If the family the family unit has disintegrated, or the family unit has unraveled, that is, the father is not in the household for whatever reason, then not Jeff, but the scripture says that land where that is prevalent is going to be cursed. We see that curse being played out on our streets on a daily, and the primary reason for that, there's some ancillary reasons to that, but the primary reason is that within the last, I'd say 30 years or so, the family unit in our community has unraveled, and the nuclear family is not what it was. What we had during Jim Crow, what we had during Reconstruction, what we had during the 30s and 40s, and even up into the 60s and into the 70s, is that for the most part in black communities, despite all the racism and everything else, economic oppression, all of that has always been, we always had the family unit. The reason that we
family and community.
In the community, the reason why we see a lot of the stuff going on in our community right now is that the family unit has unraveled. It's hard, to your point, if the student is 16 and the mother is 32, then that means that that mother was just a child when she had that child. Father is not there. And so therefore it's hard to get those, not saying it can't be done, but it's hard to get those values in that community established like that.
And Carlee, do you have a comment? Or you want to move on to the next topic?
No, actually, I do have a comment. We were talking about the elected official having integrity and everything, and I really did want to get back to that part. We started talking about the integrity of the household with the parents and everything, being available to the children. When we talk about the elected officials, a lot of these people that are elected are not leaders. We've already said that, but they are hiring the people that are more puppets. They're not looking for. They're not vetting for leadership abilities. They're vetting for people that can be manipulated. And if you go into office and you come in with too much power on what you decide or desire for your community, that you are labeled difficult, and they don't necessarily want to deal with anybody that's difficult. So they're not looking for leadership or integrity. They're looking for puppets.
Exactly.
And this is the Body Talk Radio program on the No Static Radio Network, and you're listening to the Body Talk Power Panel. And again, we have Miss Carlee, better known as Miss Everything, to my right, and Miss Coffee. And we have Pastor Jeff Doggett to my left and James to my far left. That was a good discussion, and we're going to close it down and go to the second topic. The second topic, since all of us are involved in the media, whatever that means, what's the role and responsibility of the media in the political process and reporting the news?
So to me, I don't see how you can say we closed that prior issue. Because to me, as soon as you start talking about politicians, you're talking about money, wealth, influence. And people with money, wealth, and influence, they use the politicians and the media to detract and distract from what the real issues are that we should care about. So we talk about media. So on the way here, I listen to a lot of public radio. And at 2 o'clock, they're going to talk about the Supreme Court, how they have divided America. And it's like, and again, this is so misleading if you don't pay attention, because it's like, so you're going to skip over how the politicians fixed it where they determined 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago who's going to be on the federal courts and then use that to select who's going to be on the Supreme Court. But, so to me, I don't see, and that's important because they make the decisions on media, uh, the media talks about these issues and they pick and choose how they want to talk about it. And again, there's the same as the politicians. People put them in those jobs to what Carlee just said
To be public.
because you're going to do this. And the interesting thing is, it's always like when you talk about stuff, like I listen to a lot of Dr. Greg Carr, Nubia Narrative, and he has he said he has over like 50,000 books. And you listen, and it's like you almost don't really need to read all of those books to get to the same answer. If you live those experiences, you don't have to be a politician, you don't have to be a media to experience what Carlee said. 10, 20, 30 years of working a job, you're going to get the same result. And the people that wrote the books, they're explaining, they're just really describing their experience. But it's the same thing. And so it's almost like you already know what the story is going to be if you read it. And so the media, their responsibility is to detract people, the citizens, from the real issues that they should care about. Because again, going back to talking about the house, the family, the community.
Yeah.
If the parents are saying, my kids need to learn civics, they need to be at the school. And if the schools, if they press upon the school system that we want this taught, it will be taught. Before the show, a part of what I was listening to this morning on the way here again was the state of baseball. And one thing I always say is, you will get change when people stand to lose or make money. And so if the teachers stand to lose getting a job in these communities, if the communities stand to lose people going to school from getting a degree in education, if the community stands to, businesses stand to go out of business because the school isn't there, people are buying gas, grocery store, lunch, and all of that, you'll get the change. And so media, they don't talk like what we're talking about here. They talk about all of this other distracting stuff, and they leave out all of these other important facts and details. And then they crack me up when in 2016, oh my God, they said we're fake, and it's like, now y'all need to stop, right? Y'all need to stop. It's like, this stuff isn't new. Like I said, if you watch it, like I've watched the stock market for decades. And it's like, you watch it, it's like market never going down, right? I mean, show me a stockbroker that's going to show me a mutual fund manager, a hedge fund manager that's going to say the market is going down. And so, you look at it, and so it's like, really, what's the point of these people? And again, it goes to what Carlee said. We want people in these positions that's going to do what we want them to do.
Well, see, it's interesting. You brought up a couple of things, and I'll do what Jeff says, go backwards. So you brought up the stock market. I trended also. How could the stock market climb during the pandemic?
Yeah.
It reached one of its highest points ever. And nobody was really buying anything unless you went to Target, whatever. Target stock went up through the roof. The other thing you mentioned was the media and judges, more so, not the media in relationship to the judges. See, there's tenure points. You can only serve 2 terms as the president. There's no tenure in the Senate, no tenure in the House, and all federal judiciary appointments are lifetime. And I've said over my lifetime, that when I was 2, but when I became a mature adult, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Certain presidents, they're kind of sort of elected, but they're really selected to do certain things.
Exactly.
And certain presidents are selected to change the federal judiciary.
Yep.
Can you imagine all of us around the table? We're in our 30s, and we are.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You get an appointment to the appellate level. Carlee gets the district level, which is the court level per se, a hearing. Jeff Appellate James Appellate and I get nominated to the Supreme Court at 33, 34. That's a long time. And depending on the judges or that person's leanings, they influence. And like you pointed out, the Constitution is a document, and if you're a member of the Federalist Society, okay, they really don't consider the Constitution as a living document. It is what it is, what it is. What is a liberal justice? And you hear the media banner those terms, or what is a conservative justice? Is it based upon how they rule maybe at the state level or how they practice law? You just don't know. And Ms. Coffey, I agree with you. The media is like a shell game.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear what we're talking about on Fox, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, or what's that station you watch all the time?
The Word Network.
Actually, I look at MSNBC and CNN.
Well, so let's go back to the media thing. I'm sorry, Jeff.
Go ahead. No, finish your thought.
I'm finished. It's your show, Jeff. Go ahead.
No, my show
You
is
said it was my show.
But
You can
To-
downside.
to answer your question, you asked what, for us personally, what is the role of media? So, from a personal standpoint, just to talk about the Saturday show, all right? My responsibility is to tell the truth. You know, that's one of the reasons why I named it The Right Side, because I figured the responsibility of that show, we talk about politics, sports, and the issues of the day, is to tell the truth. Not have a leftist slant, not have a right slant, a conservative slant, or a liberal slant. But to tell the truth, at least as I see it. I'm not going to come on the air and lie. I'm not going to come on the air with agendas. We'll look at what's going on and just expose it for what I believe is the truth. Now, do you get that from general media? Of course not, because you're going to get a slant from the Foxes and the Newsmax of the world. That's why Fox just had to pay out a $1.8, almost $2 billion settlement to the voting machine, to a company, because of the lies that they told on the air and they allowed to go over the air. And MSNBC is going to give you more of a left-leaning slant to it. But to be honest with you, and I'm saying that some of you may disagree with it, when I watch something like a network, say like MSNBC or CNN, even though they give a quote liberal, unquote, especially MSNBC slant to it, they don't bend the truth. They do tell the truth. And then they give their thoughts and opinions on it. So to wrap it up, let somebody else talk. My view of the media is you as a media reporter, talk show host, cable news host, whatever it is to tell the truth as you see it, not to lie. Come on the air and deliberately and openly tell lies.
Miss Carlee, better known as Miss Everything, on the Entertainment Plug.
Yes.
Comes on Saturday from 11 to 1.
Thank you for that plug.
It's $1.
I put out my tab. Well, as a media person, I believe that no matter where you are reporting, it should be the same report across the board. And what I mean by saying that is the color bias is a major factor in media where they may cover a story, and the same exact story can happen to one particular race and in another particular race, and they'll cover that story with two different with a total bias. So when we're dealing with one race, it won't be an aggravated thing. It's going to be like, Johnny kind of had a bad day today, and we don't know what was going on in his household, and We don't know exactly what was on his mind. Maybe something happened in Johnny's household, and this is why Johnny just shot up the whole school. Now, then you'll go into the urban community and say, well, Poo Poo and them over here, you know, I gotta say Poo Poo and them, right? So Poo Poo and them over here, oh, you know, they were raised in this particular place, and they make their graduation picture look like a mug shot, and then it's like, yeah, but he's aggravated this, and he's been a danger to society since he was born. You know, he pokes so and so with a pencil over here, and he, you know, it's like the way they cover these stories have such a racial bias, and if they handle both stories with the same amount of integrity, is what I ask from the media. There's a story today that was on online, and it's two black young ladies actually killed their mother. They killed their mother. They stabbed their mother over a cell phone, 12 and 14. And the 14-year-old is being charged as an adult. This young lady, they put her picture, they put her name, they put everything, birth certificate, everything was plastered all over the news media. What she did was wrong. They don't know the backstory. They don't know if this mother had been abusive to these children. They don't know if this mother had allowed men to misuse these children. But instead of you just looking at these people like they're children, they plastered their faces all over the TV as if they were different, okay? Now, let's flip that. We've had other people who literally went out and did some things for no apparent reason. Somebody called them ugly or said something that they didn't necessarily like, and they literally shot up whole schools. You don't see their picture. You don't know their names.
No.
And they're not charged as an adult.
No.
They want to see what psychological issue this child has before we even make any judgment of this child. This is my concern with media. If we're going to handle media a certain way, it should be handled with that same level of integrity across the board.
And that carries on beyond being a child. Because when you look at, also in the news today, is the mother that went next door to get the kid's iPad, and the neighbor shot through the door with the kid standing out there with the mother, and they have not arrested.
You're saying it was outside? No, they were at a park. The story you're talking about, what happened? There's a black woman who has 4 children in Florida, and what happened is she had her children at a local park. They were in a public place. They went to go leave, and this white lady literally took the child's iPad. Now the kids left it, but she took it. And when they went back to go get it, the kid said, "That's my iPad. Can I have it?" She started yelling these racial slurs at the kid. Well, the mother still went back to go get the iPad, and when she went back and approached the lady to get her property, the lady shot her and killed her in front of her 4 children in a public place.
And ain't been arrested. But if you flip that,
ain't been arrested. And they said, we don't know what's going on. Exactly. You'll be above the jail. They would know exactly who you are. And they would have your car, your grandmother, and everybody would be in there saying that you're an accessory to this crime. So that's what I'm saying. If it was switched.
Well, and you listen to the Body Talk radio program and No Static Radio Network. It's interesting. Somebody, I believe it was James, or it might have been James, used the term, well, let me back up. Jeff used the term truth. The truth shouldn't be left up to somebody's interpretation. The truth is the truth. If you, using the story that Carlee brought up in Florida, depending on when or what network you're watching or you read, one network made it appear that they were at home.
Absolutely.
You just said they were in a park.
Yes.
Okay, so we got a conflict already. I'm not saying you're wrong. You might have read something more recent. And granted, the white lady has not been arrested as of yet. She hasn't even been charged. Now, normally you shoot somebody, the police want to say, well, come ride with us. We'll stop at Burger King and get you a Whopper.
I'd be like Dylan Roof, who shot up Mother Emmanuel.
Well, Jeff, you brought that up.
So, that's exactly what happened. They went to go arrest him, killed 9 people, and and they went to arrest him. And when they went to arrest him, they stopped at
Yeah,
Burger King
yeah.
and got him a Burger King meal, and then took him to jail in process.
Well, no, he was hungry, so we had to stop. See, what's sad here, and we could all tell personal stories. I know of a family who lost his son in Florida, and the state's attorney, which is another term for prosecutor in Florida, declined to prosecute, and it was reckless homicide.
See, when you talk about media, again, I think what's missing in society is carrying things through,
Mhm.
right? And so when you talk about media, now, James started out with the story, and then Carlee filled in some information. That's how you should use media, is because I do believe in, again, we're talking about in a perfect world, character and integrity, but when I talk, I'm talking about how do things really go. And so that we know people are going to use media to not tell the truth, to slant facts, to do all of these things. So again, it is incumbent upon the individual to say, okay, wow, what else goes with this story, right? And when I was younger, I was a news addict. When I was 9, 10 years old, I used to watch the news all of the time. That's why I don't really watch it now. So listening to you all, and when I get in situations like this, when I'm around more people, that's when I learn more news.
Absolutely.
Because as a kid, I watched news. I watched like Bill O'Reilly before he ever got to Fox, right? It was a surprise to me to see him there, right? All of these people. And what I quickly learned was, by the time I got to my 20s, my early 20s was, okay, these stories are the same. They just swap out the people. And so they continuously tell the same stories. And so that's, again, when I think of media, again, it's just like the politicians we were talking about earlier. What is their role? The person doesn't have character because you don't necessarily need character to do the right thing that's the best for the masses. And there can be layers of not having character or integrity. I just may feel this way towards Carlee, but then I like you all, or you, for whatever reason. And so I like to deal with people from the perspective of the quote that Maya Angelou has made famous: "When a person show you who they are, believe them." The most important part, she said, though, is the first time, right? And so I like to, so if you don't have integrity, if you don't have character, okay, I got you. I know how, okay, I see how you go. And so that doesn't keep me from being able to deal with you, work with you, or whatever the situation, however we, end up in the same environment or space. And the same with the media. I understand what they do. Like I said, when you watch, like when I used to try to watch Fox, and again, years ago, before it got like it was, and as it started changing, and you see that, wow, they're just gonna double down on a double down, right? And then so once they saw again that it's making money and not losing money, then they're gonna keep doing it. And then they swap out the same thing with the stock channels. It was a lady, Meredith Whitney, in 2008 and 9. She was talking about all of the debt that the country was in, that all of the states were in. They hurried up and got her off. She had left one of the major Wall Street financial institutions and started her own boutique thing. I think she's a farmer now. They ran her out of business. Now, when I look at, that's all I watch a lot of is finance stuff. Now everybody is on there talking about, oh, this is what happened in history. This is what the Fed does. I used to work there. Now they want to tell it because they see that layer. Now they're not in. They dropped, and they're almost treated like what Carlee was describing, like the average Joe Blow. So now they want to tell. And it's like, but you weren't telling this. You weren't being fair and balanced.
That's very similar to all the people that were in the Trump administration. Now all of them are now writing books and saying.
But that's not new. They all do that.
Yeah.
When you look at Bush when he first got in there, they go in there. And what people really don't do is what you all started about talking about the FBI. Go talk to the 20, 30, 40-year career FBI people, and you'll learn how the stuff really goes. But again, those people are not in those positions. They do not seek those positions for that. They seek those positions for power, for influence, for connections, and all of those things. They don't seek them for that. They seek to use the media You know, again, I'm listening to them this morning talk about the state of baseball. And I mean, they will talk about anything but people got turned off with steroids.
Yeah.
Hot dogs and hamburgers cost $50. They will talk about all the statistics, oh, it's slow. And it's like, so everyone who stopped watching because it was slow. And not because it was rigged.
Right.
I remember watching, and I'm going to let you all in once. Years ago, I was a super sports fan. And I'm watching the Cubs, love the Cubs. And I'm looking at Sammy Sosa like, wow, this is interesting. This guy, he's the only one sweating like this. Like, wow, you know. And it's interesting, he only hits a home run or strikes out. You know, and I'm just sitting watching by myself. I'm not talking to anyone. I'm just like, wow, year after year. I'm like, wow. And then when they came up with, he was on steroids, ding, 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 ding. And if I know this, and it ain't even my job in baseball.
Coffee, trust me, it wasn't a mystery. The commissioner knew it. If you go back to it, is that was after the strike, and people were turned off. And so what happened was the commissioner wink, wink, nod, nod, looked the other way when Sosa and McGuire and then Barry Bonds and Rafael Palmeiro and a whole lot of others started using steroids, and that drew people back to the game again. And now with this pitch clock and the no shift and what have you, they sped up the game. But back to really like media, here's the problem. Here's the thing with media. Media has an influence over all aspects of society, including the judicial branch. Example, Kyle Rittenhouse. Al said he wasn't going to call names. I'm calling names.
Okay.
Kyle Rittenhouse.
That's what I'm talking
Can I
about.
take a privilege here? I didn't say I wasn't calling names. No, I'll call names, but go ahead.
No, you're talking about local politicians.
Right.
Kyle Rittenhouse comes from out of state, comes from Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin. 17 years old, I mean he's underage, with a weapon. Cross state lines. That's a crime right there. You can go across state line. Anyway, he is allowed to walk past the police during a so-called riot. He didn't hide. He walked right past the police line. They allowed him to pass through. We know what happened. And now, because he became a hero to certain media outlets and media types and what have you, that had an influence, I believe, on his trial, which allowed him to get off. I hope that we don't see the same thing with this case with the Marine, ex-Marine, and in the subway, the choke out in the New York subway, where you had a guy, you choked a guy out for how defecated and on himself and all of that during the time, and it was beyond the point of trying to keep safety for everybody on the subway there. But yet, here again, in certain parts of the media, he's being portrayed as a hero because, after all, we're tired of being harassed by people on the subway and all of that. And so let's just see how this one plays out as well.
Well, let's bring this home before we take a 360-second break. See, one of the things that, especially when you talk about the media, let's just talk about the national news, comes on at 6:30 on most of your network. At that one given time, you have millions of people watching. So in that 30-minute segment, which the news really doesn't last that long, it's actually about 18 minutes, about 24 minutes. Here we'll split the difference, 23 minutes. They're influencing or attempting to influence so many people, millions and millions of people. And even if all three major networks said the same thing, what happens in this country, and I sign cards this way, especially when I used to teach and still do with the people today, listen period, learn period, discern period, then decide. Most people don't do that anymore.
Yep.
And that's really sad. The one thing that, and we'll come back after the break and finish this topic and pick up the remaining two if we have time. The media has a responsibility, but is the responsibility actually really to tell the truth?
Right.
Or is the responsibility to somebody who's paying them. If you, and it could be Fox, CNN, or whoever, if Fox always brings on a certain political leaning person or people, that's what you're going to hear. And that's going to be divergent to what, let's say, MSNBC does because they bring on liberal guests, per se. And I don't know if any of you, and I don't watch it, The View, where Tim Scott was on, Senator Tim Scott. He got into a real heated argument with one of the female.
I saw it on
With
Roland
Sonny
last
Holston.
night.
Yeah.
Well, he was with Sonny Holston yesterday.
And I'm not here to defend Tim Scott or the young lady he was arguing with. We all have an opinion, and our opinions can be different, and that's okay. We can agree to disagree is how we agree to disagree. And Joey Bear, depending on the media outlet that you listen to, she called for the staff to come up to separate these two. And I didn't see, I saw a clip, but they're showing you what they want you
Exactly.
to believe.
Because I watched Roland, he talked about it, he didn't show any of that. So again, I don't watch the news because it's trigger driven.
Right. And we're going to take a break on this one. We're calling, the show's based in Cleveland. I'm not taking anything away from the Scene magazine or any other media outlet here, written more so. This is a one newspaper town.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
And certain articles or writers, I will read in the Plain Dealer. One of them I actually went to high school with. When you have a one newspaper town, Chicago's different. Washington, D.C. is different. Dallas is different. Nashville is different. And, I'm somewhat disappointed. You can buy subscriptions online. The Washington Post, I think, is one of the better newspapers I've ever read. And they're somewhat balanced, not biased. But when you live in a one-horse newspaper town, you have to be very careful. Extremely careful.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, if you watch the media, who's often portrayed as the reporters?
But to your point, and I agree with you, but really, how many people even read the newspaper anymore?
Well,
And that, the print journalism, even with outlets like the Washington Post or the New York Times, what have you, people aren't reading newspapers anymore. People are going, getting their news or their information from all these different sources on IG, YouTube, you name it. And people aren't reading newspapers like they used to. And again, I will show my age here. Like when I was growing up, we had a 2 newspaper town here. And, I used to read the newspaper. And I'm a victim of it myself. I very rarely ever read anything in the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Most of the news I get is national, or I go online to various sources to get it.
Mr. James?
I think I think you're correct, but I think that's because the content is so jaded, and we'll call names. The content is so jaded in the Plain Dealer,
Mm-hmm.
and
It's the Cleveland Plain Dealer.
the Cleveland
That's
Plain Dealer,
James who said that.
whatever we want it to be.
You say that's not the point.
Whatever they want it to be, that's neither here nor there.
Right.
We know that it's a lot of the material is one-sided, and they lack creativity, and because there are still a lot of print, publications that they also offer a digital aspect. So
Right,
when you talk
right.
about these 2 newspaper towns, a lot of them are like busting through the roof with digital subscriptions, things like that. So it's really about the level of creativity that they have and what they're doing to match the current reader. There's a lot of people who still like newspapers, and the reality is the actual newspaper itself, it speaks to the older generation. So a lot of them, they still want their newspaper, and they still want to get their newspaper in the morning and sit down and read the newspaper. So, they are, they obviously would need to still cater to them, but they should be catering to the digital side of it too. So, us being a one newspaper town, let's start a newspaper.
Right.
And oh, go.
No, James, and you're correct. See, one of the things, the digital side would appeal more so, let's say, to that younger generation like me, because y'all are old.
But you know what? But and you say that humorously, but you actually are correct though, because I mean, my mother is 70 and she lives by her
Your mama
iPhone.
gonna get you too. I hope she on that.
No, look, she's probably watching my life. Like she's probably watching my life. And like my mother is like headstrong on. I'm 70 years old. Like she don't care about like
Alright, so that's life. Baby.
But I'm just saying, like you gotta embrace your age. But I just think that, like,
No, you don't.
But my mother, like, she lives by her iPhone, and she's 70, and I mean, she has subscription on top of subscription on top of subscription, whether it's newspapers or whether it's Netflix and Hulu
Well, I
and
think
Paramount Plus.
Al, when you were talking about us having one newspaper town, I think you were saying it in reference to the information in it, like how much information that we have and the level of control Cleveland Plain Dealer has over our district because we only have this one. Because we only have the one newspaper, and then when you talk about the Washington Post, some places have more than one news outlet where you can actually weigh there you go, balance the two. I think that's where that came from, not necessarily whether it was digital or an actual piece of paper, because we're trying to save our trees, James.
Well, see, the other thing, and we do have to take a break here. See, what's important here is, and thank you, Carlee, for clarifying that for me.
And saving the trees.
Yes.
Yeah, well, trees need to go anyway, but
What?
yeah, if you have trees, you have leaves. The city picks up leaves in January. Go figure when it's on the ground. If you read the Plain Dealer, you don't see everything that truly happens.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You'll never know how many homicides there were in the city of Cleveland yesterday or 2 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is that an arrangement that's been struck between some administration, the Plain Dealer, well, we just don't want to cover that. Now, Ms. Coffey brought it up, and both you and she brought it up, if it happens on a certain side of town, it'll be covered. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, there's certain, like I said, there's certain articles in the Plain Dealer, certain writers that are good. There's certain, I think her name is Miss Kuda. I call her, I'm not trying to make fun of her, she's a stringer for the Plain Dealer. And she wrote an article about city council. And she specifically zeroed in on one member. And that member was Joe Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And she said he's probably the least unprepared of anybody in any committee meeting. And she went on through this article. And then she had a PS, fancy for postscript.
I'm not finished.
Yeah, she said, could one of his fellow council members teach him how to follow an agenda?
Oh, wow.
That's the truth. I'll put it up on the website. But I'm like, wow. And I'm going to say this writer went after him, but she told the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that's important, I think, and somewhat relates to the media, the city of Cleveland has a broadcast channel, 20.
Right, TV 20.
Now, I'm like you. I'm a policy wonk. I had to do that for a living. So, how many people actually watch their government at work or at play?
See,
There's
again,
more play than work.
Again, I think that this world that we live in now, again, and we can, bottleneck, all of these issues together. Mm-hmm. Or we can say, these are the issues, these are the gaps that need to be filled. This is what, like James said, we need to start our own newspaper. But I think that there's this where people want to be famous by Friday. And so starting a newspaper, I'm not going to be famous by Friday. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to do this, and this, so I'm not really interested in it. And then when you start, coming up with the ways of doing things like what you think the standard is, well, we're not making money doing this, but what is really the reason for doing it?
And I think that's what it comes down to, because I don't want to become famous by doing it. I want to do something that's going to make a difference.
I do,
right. And you have to be, and then
so we're not going to include
and that's what
be missing everything except a news publisher.
I'm gonna have salad.
Well, and we'll take a break. So we're gonna take a break. And James is gonna develop the name of the newspaper, and we'll all be famous by 1:30 this
Yeah.
afternoon. So we'll be right back in 360 seconds. We'll be mathematicians. That's 5 minutes. Thank you for listening to Body Talk. We'll be right back. What's the name of the newspaper?
Has violence happened to you or your family? Violence can affect all parts of your life, sometimes in ways you can't see. Violence can affect the way you eat, sleep. It causes you to lose focus, feel angry, afraid, or even use drugs or drinking as a way to escape. But we're here to tell you that violence doesn't have to keep hurting, and you can change your life starting now with help from the Trauma Recovery Center. We want you to take control of your life. Today could be the day. The Trauma Recovery Center offers real help for real needs in real time. They offer services for food, clothes, safety, emotional support, and a whole lot more. So do not let violence control you. You can break free, and TRC can help. Give them a call at 216-644-5487. They will come to you wherever you are. They offer real help for real needs in real time. They can give you the tools to rebuild your life and your health. Call the Trauma Recovery Center today. 216-644-5487. They will come to you wherever you are. They are free. They are 24/7 and confidential. So if you want out and don't know where to start, call the Trauma Recovery Center. The Trauma Recovery Center will help you take back your life after violence starting today. Call today. Get the help you need today. 216-644-5487. The Trauma Recovery Center of Northeast Ohio, also affiliated with the Center for Families and Children. And now, I'm getting back into it, you guys. And so today, I want to reintroduce to some on Art History 365 and introduce to others Mary Kenner. Mary Kenner's biography is by request, so here it is. Mary Beatrice Davidson Kenner, born May 17th, 1912, died January 13th, 2006, was the An American inventor most noted for her development of the sanitary belt. Yes, somebody was in a mood today. So, although racial discrimination caused her patent for the sanitary belt to be prevented for 30 years, you heard me, 30 years, Kenner received 5 patents, which includes a carrier attachment for invalid walker and bathroom tissue holders. So, as far as her early life and education, Kenner graduated from Dunbar High School in 1931. She attended Howard University. However, she was unable to finish due to financial difficulties. Kenner did not receive any college degrees or professional training. Women at the time were kept out of scientific establishments, or academic institutions. Kenner and her family moved to Washington, D.C. when she was young, and here is where she stayed updating on her opportunities to have ideas patented in the United States and Trademark Office. Kenner invented the adjustable sanitary belt with an inbuilt moisture-proof napkin pocket. She completed the patent application for her invention in 1954, and in 1956, the application was approved. The invention was described as an eliminator for chafing and irritation normally caused by the devices of its class. However, the company that first showed the interest in her invention, the Sun Snap Nap Pack Company, rejected it after they discovered that she was an African American woman. Yeah, that part. So Kenner never made any money from the sanitary belt because her patent expired and became a public domain, allowing it to be manufactured freely. She later invented a modification of the sanitary belt that included the moisture-resistant pocket. And, between 1956 and 87, she received 5 total patents for her household and personal item creations. She shared a patent on the toilet tissue holder with her sister Mildred Davidson. A lot more to learn about her. She also held a patent on a back washer that would be mounted on the shower or tub wall, also known as a backwash. I need that right now. This invention was patented in 1987, patent number 4696068. She also patented the carrier attachment for the walker in 1959, after Mildred developed multiple sclerosis. So listen here. I say it all the time, y'all. You ought to know what it is. I want somebody to call in and tell me. Anyway, look, if you don't want to go to a library, if you can't go to a library, I say it all the time. Google, Google. And listen, Google. Knowing your history is knowing you now. I'm decisive for Body Talk. And now back to Ayl Bridges.
Thank you, Marie, for that read about the Black History moment. And you're listening to Body Talk, the Power Panel. And let me reintroduce the panelists. To my far right, we have Miss Coffee. To my immediate right, we have Carlee, better known as Miss Everything. To my left, we have the pastor, Jeffrey Doggett. And to the far left, we have James. What's important is that all the panelists today have shows on the No Static Network, and I strongly recommend that you listen to those shows. Miss Coffee comes on Mondays from 11 to 1. Carlee and James are co-hosts. They come on Saturdays from 11 to 1. Jeff Doggett is the only strange one. He comes on from 3 to 5 on Saturdays. And of course, you listen to Body Talk that comes on Mondays from 11 to 1. Before we get back to our topics, just really quick, as you know, there's two mantras that the show is based upon this year. The first one is the silent killer in black men is prostate cancer. I'm encouraging every black man out there to go get tested, just a PSA test. It's a blood draw. They can determine what your PSA level is. The other one is number 2 or number 1A is violence affecting women. Let me make something very clear. It matters not if you work at Amazon, sell Avon, or if you're a stay-at-home mom. It matters not if you are an attorney, magistrate, judge, doctor, nurse, STNA, or whatever your profession. If you need assistance, if you need an escape plan from an abusive environment, call the police, call the trauma center, call the YWCA. If you're a true friend of someone that is being abused, be a better friend. Do not return that individual, that woman into that situation. Paraphrasing a book titled by Bishop T.D. Jakes, Loose and Free That Woman. So let's go back to the power panel on Body Talk. And I think all the panelists picked it up. Usually what I try to do is select topics that are interwoven. They really don't stand independently of each other, unless you're talking about baseball and football or so in Cleveland, there's no trophies except in basketball, championship trophies.
Thanks for that reminder. By the way, Coffee, I like the Cubs too up until 2016, but I won't talk about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
And get the first thing smoking up out of Cleveland to get to the downtown parade too.
The other thing I want to bring in before we go back to the discussion is that this segment is dedicated to Elia Brown. She was shot in the head at 2 years old. She's now 7. And somebody stole the vehicle, the van that her motorized wheelchair and stroller are in. And her family is trying to raise funds to replace those 2 items. So I'm reaching out and asking businesses such as O'Reilly's, AutoZone, any car dealership, individuals, go to gofund.me/50 small d077f3. Again, I'll repeat it, gofund.me/50 small d077f3, and make whatever donation you can so that this young lady can have transportation to move about her home or in the community. If you just want to donate $1, $10, $100, or $1,000, the family would greatly appreciate that. So back to the discussion here. James brought up the topic about starting a newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, listen, James. So we're going to hold you to it.
Oh, okay.
No, James is serious. If a lot of you might not know James, you have to listen to he and Carlee's show. He's probably one of the better media wizards in and around Cleveland. That's actually the truth. He's a very humble person. He really is.
Humble James is what we call him.
Uncle James. It's interesting because if you're from Cleveland and more so the greater Northeast Ohio area, there still is the Call and Post, which is a black newspaper. In Akron, there's a black newspaper called The Reporter. And some kind of how those newspapers have gotten off track. They don't cover the relevant issues affecting the urban community or the black community. So James and Carlee will be working on that, and if you want to volunteer as a...
We will. And just to interject a little bit, just a quick question, like,
Sure.
how many of us actually, like on Instagram, how many of us follow, like, the Cleveland Remembrance page?
I unfollowed that.
No, I'm just saying, like,
Okay.
if there was something of that
So
sort.
I remember page.
I'm just saying, like, if there was something of that sort, though, that, like, covered our communities
Yeah, I mean, you look at Roland Martin's show, right? And I remember
that was a good
Roland
example.
Martin, for one, you look at our experience. Now, I do not have a journalism background. I'm acquiring one over the last 3 years. But I remember Roland Martin, I used to see him on CNN. I remember when he was on BET. Then I listened to Tom Joyner Morning Show. And then he was, in there trying to get, he would be in there just doing a very short, news segment on there. And I remember when Tom Joyner announced his retirement in 2018, and Roland Martin was saying, I'm going to start my own digital show. And so when you look at what he's doing, look how long ago he started, and he was committed to doing that, and he did it. And look at how many people tune into that, how many people watch that. Look at how he's got it on all of these digital platforms. Absolutely. And all of and look at what, like when who was the first one who died? What was the comedian? Wrote everything for Richard Pryor. When he died,
Mooney.
They called Roland, and Roland did a whole thing on him. When Harry Belafonte died, he didn't do news. He did the whole thing on Harry Belafonte, right? And so again, the way he talked about politics, he's telling you how it affects you. He reiterates over and over and over, what people should be doing, why they should be doing these things, what the effect and impact is on, society, what these laws and stuff mean, what these acts mean, that these politicians, and so he's sticking with it. And so again, I think that there's just a lot of things now. There's a desire or expectation to be famous by Friday.
Absolutely.
And people have very short shrift for long-term projects anymore.
Absolutely.
Long-term endeavors. Something that is worthwhile. I mean, you look at a newspaper, that would be there. We're dead and gone. And it's instructive for the generation after us. We're not leaving anything for generations after us if we just continue to consume the same things that they consume and are not making a difference or impact, that they can follow or emulate and or bring them in so that they feel some responsibility as, civic responsibility, personal responsibility, professional responsibility to hand it down to the people after them. Absolutely. And so I think that it's something that, and Roland says this almost every show, it comes on no less than 5 days a week. He says this all of the time. Black-owned news outlets, news is not the same as black-owned. They can't, the shows that do call themselves black news, they don't let those people just talk about Harry Belafonte for an hour. They don't break down these things like we're doing for a whole hour. Last week, where was he at? He was in Atlanta at an event. I mean, we would never have known that was going on. How many people in the country would even know that event is going on Absolutely. If he wasn't showing that? So Absolutely. Again, that's something that we definitely and desperately need. And I have to imagine that there are other people with journalism backgrounds Absolutely. In other cities trying to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's many people here that's trying to do it too. And, I always see the brightness in the project.
Right.
So I'm like, we can get this going and we can get the Rollins and, people of his stature involved in it. And, I think it's a great idea.
See, and thank you, James and Ms. Coffey, for mentioning Roland. Another gentleman, he more so has a digital platform, Dr. Boyce Watkins.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's Mr. Black Finance Guru, Mr. Finance / Economics Guru. And not everything he says I agree with, but he's at least out there.
But that's going to be everybody. You're not going to agree with everything that everybody does.
Oh, most definitely. I hope you don't.
Now, one thing that Watkins is doing that I like now is he is doing the advertising. The black businesses are advertising with him. And once we give people more options to do these things and integrate with these other entities that companies that are doing these same things, that's what you have to have. And you look at how long Dr. Boyce Watkins has been doing what he is doing. And like I said, I like now when you watch his show, he has the advertisements down there or whatever, it's showing that he's out there networking, communicating with people, black-owned businesses. I mean, and the way he says it all of the time too. I know they're not going to advertise for me. I don't want their money because they're going to want me to say this. They're going to want me to say it this way and this, and this. And so, when you watch his platform again, he's stuck with it.
He did, and he wasn't famous by Friday. Let's move to another topic, which seems to be a hot topic in just about every city, urban city, and more so in Cleveland. I'm not trying to take anything away from LA, New York, Chicago, Miami, or Milwaukee, or any other city.
Well, you can take everything away from Miami at this point. Oh, wow, right.
We're not going to talk about sports.
I'm with you.
I'm talking about Florida, period.
Yeah.
I'm talking about that's basketball team. Yeah. Wow.
That's Pastor Jeff Doggett.
I own it. The fashion state of Florida, run by Ron Benito Mussolini.
That part.
Well,
I own it.
And Miss Coffee is our choir director.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me flip this camera so y'all can see who the choir director is. I know y'all wondering.
The next topic is, what are some of the key variables in addressing the retention and recruitment of police officers?
Well, I wish, you hear so many things and you wish you had been able to coin these phrases and stuff. And what was one of the guys, he said the copification, some term like that he used. And so again, these topics, to my mind, tend to be connected. And so when you look at, like I used to be a news addict and I used to watch a lot of film. And, I think in this era, maybe Obama is, the president for a lot of young people. In my era, it's Jesse Jackson. Okay. And I learned a lot listening to him when he ran for president and when he was really involved in politics, And he talked about it, he raised this years ago. He said when you have Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger and these other guys in these movies shooting and killing and stabbing and beating people, they're action heroes. But when you have black guys in these movies, they're thugs. And so, you look and you say, well, so when we wonder why everybody want to shoot somebody, it's because how many movies we got with him. When you look at the music, shoot, kill, stab. And so then why are we so surprised? And so to retain police, you have to tell them, first of all, when I was growing up, they drove cars that said protect and serve. Now the thing is shoot and kill. Shoot and kill. And again, it goes back to the politicians setting up the Supreme Court. And just being an attorney, I knew when they talked about what's really driven the Black Lives Matter movement was Trayvon Martin. And so when they killed him, and then they said, well, we fear for our life, or whatever that guy come up with. Then after him, Mike Brown and all this, and they say, well, I fear for my life. I said, it's a Supreme Court case that say the police can shoot and kill people if they say they fear for their life. I just knew that instantly, right? And so when you get away from this, copification, I think they use a better term than that. I think it was copification, but it was propaganda or something, where the police are these tough guys busting in, like you said, you look at cops and whatever that was in the 80s, you look at America's Most Wanted, they're busting down doors, going after people, killing them. And so, when you look at that and people think that, wow, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to do that. I like that kind of violence. When you have all these video games and all of this stuff that are showing people that this is the bad guy, this is the good guy, and you take out as many people and you get a reward. I mean, we've got to revamp that whole system. At first I heard when they said, well, I was afraid. And it's like, okay, so you got a dangerous job. So the first thing they need to say is, okay, we're going to have a meeting Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Everybody that's afraid, raise your hand. Okay, would you please turn in your badge and your gun? Right? I mean, I'm sure some people say, okay, I am afraid, and, stop. And so when you look at these systems and these structures for what they really are, that's the only way you're going to answer the question and get the result that the citizens in the country needs. It's not going to come through what should it be, because these people go in these positions to acquire power, to be able to do what they want to do. The people above them that operate and manage and run the system, they're going to keep policies in place to allow these things to happen. And so again, if we don't show how they're going to lose money, they're going to continue the system as it is. And these police officers, this system, the citizens have to be the one to say, this is what I want. And they have to be there consistently every single day until they get it. And when they don't get what they want, they need to be saying, you promised us this, and they have to hold these people accountable.
That's true. And before we go to Carlee, let's put another variable in here. How many people really want to be police officers? And it is a dangerous profession. It is. At $52,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the other item is, and I'm not defending the police, and I'm not going to demean or convict the police. If they do, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, as a police officer. General statement, of course. You know, Cleveland's been under this consent decree for going on 12 years now, which means there was something seriously wrong with the police department ever before that incident with Tamir Rice, thank you. And what happened in East Cleveland, 138 shots. That shows there's a lack of oversight.
Oh, yeah.
At the legislative level, which is city council.
A lack of oversight, or we concur with what you're doing and the way you're doing it.
And it goes back, and Carlee, let me do this real quick. It goes back to the first topic. Where's the truth? Where's the character? If you have a 17-member body of councilmen who don't ever bring in the police on a monthly, quarterly basis to discuss, well, wait a minute, how many shootings did we have here? How many abusive situations did we actually have in the city of Cleveland? They don't do that until pot is steaming or
it's
bubbles
protest.
over. Yeah, it's protest. I'm sorry, Carlee. Jeff interrupted you.
Okay. I can get when it comes to our police department, I think that is one of the major issues, the oversight of when you have something small, when there's a small issue, we don't address it, like you said. It's this oversight until the pot is extremely overflowing. When you see police brutality that does not end in a fatality, it should be addressed, not just when there's a fatality. When you see a police officer arrest somebody, drag them out their car, smash their head into the top of the window, and I've seen it, and it's just a regular stop, routine stop, because the person didn't pass away. We don't have to do anything about that. And then they'll sit you in jail for a couple of days while your bruises heal, so that they don't have to be held accountable for what they've done. So if we start handling situations as they occur, then I believe that it will diminish the amount of occurrence we actually have. Also, here in Ohio, I don't know if it's Ohio altogether or if it's just Cleveland, in order to be a police officer, you have to meet a certain age requirement. Like, they won't hire you in to be a police officer if you're over a certain age. I think they need to change that stipulation. If you're old enough and you can handle making it through the police academy and you have the integrity that's necessary to uphold proper justice, then you should be able to have that opportunity to do it. Because a person that's a little bit more mature may be able to shed more light, more sensitivity, more integrity into something like that, opposed to just, I think the cap is 35.
And too, they connect with the community better.
Yeah.
And I can speak to it from both sides, because my first cousin, was more like a younger brother to me, was Cleveland police officer Derek Owens, who was killed in the line of duty in 2008. So I can speak to it from that side of it. But as far as recruiting and retention, and the other R word is reform.
Right.
So the reform that needs to take place has to be legislative. If there is a bill right now that's dead in the Senate, that if it could even get voted on and passed, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, would create a national database for officers like what you were just talking about, Carlee.
And then they would just go to Florida and work in Florida, right?
Yeah, no, but no, I'm saying this is national though. This is a national bill.
And he passed the bill.
If it passed, which it still hasn't even been addressed on the floor of the Senate yet. Say I'm a police officer in Cleveland, I have a horrible record. If I go to Hialeah Springs, Florida, rather than now my record's not going to follow me, if you create this national database, then they see, well, Jeff was a police officer in Cleveland. He had 25 citizens' complaints against him, 22 of which were legitimate complaints. We're not going to hire him. You get that? Also, another part of this Justice and Policing Act is the getting rid of qualified immunity. Qualified immunity, if you got rid of that, would then, I believe, decrease some of the brutality that we're seeing, especially the violent brutality. Because, example, the guy, what's the young man in Memphis that, what's his name, that just was killed by the police there in Memphis that we saw the whole thing. I can't remember his name, and there's so many of these cases. But in a case like that, his family is going to sue the city of Memphis. They're going to win, but because they are citizens of the city of Memphis, the payout they get is really coming out of their pockets because they are taxpayers. If you get rid of qualified immunity, then when a police officer is sued, it's not coming out of the coffers of that city, which now will, I believe, make him or her a little more hesitant to cross that line. That's on the one hand. Now, as far as recruitment and retainment is concerned, I agree with you. At $52,000 a year, you need to pay them more, better training. Some of the things that police officers do, you can allocate other entities. For example, when there's a case where a person is dealing with a mental situation, instead of sending police in there, send mental health experts in there, and the police can be a backup in case the situation gets out of hand. But they're not really trained for that. You're asking them to do something they're really not trained for. So those are some things that can be done to perhaps recruit and retain what you do have. But we also need reform. We also need to get rid of qualified immunity, and we also need a national database so that when you have bad officers can't go from one place. An example of the guy who shot Tamir Rice, had a bad record in Independence. But his record did not follow him to when he became a Cleveland police officer.
I believe the young man named in Memphis, his name was Tyreek Nichols.
Yeah, that's Tyreek Nichols.
And to your point, again, when you look at all of this stuff, a lot of things that's going on, we really can't look at each of these things in isolation or in a vacuum. No. They're all connected because even if you have the database, you have what's going on across the states. And this has been going on for over 30, 40 years where the states are making laws daily to get the results that they want. I mean, when you look at what Florida is doing with Disney, Disney comes out and says something, they make a law. Disney responds to that, they make another law. And so they've already, within the last month, they've already passed the law that if you have been charged, accused, convicted of a crime as a police officer, come here, we're going to hire you. So again, these things cannot be looked at in isolation. You need networks like the country had in the 60s and the 70s. Even when we go back to slavery, right? The Underground Railroad, you need these networks that say, this is going on here. If we have a national database, how does this carry out to all of the other states? But as long as these states are going to continue to make laws that contravene anything the federal government does, you're going to have a problem with that. And I think that, being a police officer, it is it's a tough job. It again goes back to what we talked about earlier as far as character and integrity, because you get these people in there, they see that it's a certain culture, and that we're going to do this, or this to you.
Blue wall.
Right, and so you have those kind of issues, because when I first started, again, with Trayvon Martin, in that period of time when we first having Tamir Rice started having these killings, I said,
sorry, me and interrupt you, Carly, but to be fair, Trayvon Martin was not killed by the police. He was killed by.
But I'm saying under the same premise. Under the same premises, there's a law there that protects them and gives them this right to do it. Because we see that's what's happening now is now every citizen in certain states, you're just going to have the right to, oh, he's looking at me, gave me the side eye, I have the right to kill him. So it's all kind of related. It's just sort of, what the point is that I was trying to make, but it is a distinction with that stand your ground law and what police officers do. And so, when I first started hearing all of this stuff, then you start saying, okay, well, these are people who are intentionally signed up to be police officers to kill people, because you think most people go to work to get a job, to get a paycheck. Most people don't go to work to end up in these litigious situations. Now, look at how your family is impacted. Yeah, they may put these guys on administratively, but nevertheless, you're going to be so worn down and adversely impacted by being charged and having to go through this long, legal battle. And so, when you talk about reform, you've got to start with what is the purpose of the police, what has always been the purpose of the police, and do we get that out of the system? Do we need another system of police and reform? Again, growing up in Chicago, they had gangs. I remember we used to take the trains and all of that. They had I forget what the Angels, I forget what their name was. They wore red hats, and they were
Guardian Angels.
The Guardian Angels. And they made it so that if you came on a train late at night or you thought you were going to rob people or anything, they had someone there to, kind of intervene on people's behalf. And again, you don't have any of those things anymore, and it's just all, again, police. It's the police fault. And again, going to James' point, we need our own newspaper. We need to find a way to learn how to patrol and control our own communities so that, we have something to handle and deal with the police when they come in these situations, when they see people with, these traffic violations, and they using that as an opportunity to, engage in whatever conduct they want to. We have someone from the community in that situation.
Well, the other thing too, and not to paint with bar brush, I would say that the majority of police officers are good officers.
Yes.
But given the lethal nature of the profession, those that are not, it causes harm to citizens. But one other thing, Al, and I'll see to someone else, as far as you talking about recruiting, if I was thinking about being a police officer, one of the things that would stop me is the fact that I'm outgunned, because we live in a society where military-style weapons are legal for private citizens to own. So the Uvalde police caught a lot of flack last year for not going into Robb Elementary School when that guy went in there and killed all those babies in there. And one of the reasons they were hesitant was that he was armed with an automatic weapon, and to my knowledge, they weren't. So they, even though it's their job, they should have gone in. I'm not absolving them. But one of the things that, when you talk about recruiting, I'm just speaking from a personal standpoint, if I was considering to be a police officer, which my age I'm not, but what would make me hesitant is that, if I'm in a situation, it's a lethal situation, and I have a 9mm, and this guy has an AR-15, and he's got body armor on, guess who's going to win that battle? It's not going to be me. So that's something that needs to be done on a national level too, is to reinstate the assault weapons ban to get these military weapons out of the hands of private citizens and off of the streets of this country.
Well, before we go to the editor-in-chief of the Black Newspaper Network, James, there's a couple of things. James, you're on the spot now. At 18 years old, you can join the military.
Mhm.
You have to be 21 years old to become a police officer. Now, do I think 18 years old is too young to be a police officer in most urban cities? Personally, I do.
I do too.
Okay. The other thing is, we mentioned the compensation. We also have to talk about the culture, because the culture is probably more important than technically the compensation level. Because if you're going to walk into an environment where it's beat 'em up, shoot 'em up, beat 'em up, that's not something, I'm speaking for everybody here, we want to be a part of. The other thing, and I compare, we use the term law and order, not the name of the show. To have order, you have to have laws. And you have to have the laws enforced. And we do have a baker at the table. I'm not going to tell you it's Carlee. Carlee knows that when she bakes pies and bread at this one little counter or kitchen, there's flour on the floor. Flour goes this way, goes that way. And I'm not, when I say messy, law and order is a messy process. And I'm not just speaking from the standpoint of abusing somebody. This is the third consent decree in the city of Cleveland. A lot of people don't know that. And 12 years is a long time. It's probably not going to be long enough. So let's move on to the editor-in-chief, James. And you have a comment on the retention and recruitment piece of police officers?
I just think that I agree with everything that everybody else was saying, but I think that also you have to look at the resources that are provided to them, when they go through the police academy. I think that's something that needs to be carefully reviewed, to see what kind of skills are they actually getting to be able to, handle and deal with the situations that they're going to be facing when they go out, in the city. And I mean, I think that's the biggest piece of it, is looking at the resources that they're getting. So I mean, I agree with everything else, but I feel like the thing that was left out are the additional resources that they're getting.
You raise a good point. And going back to Pastor Jeff about the police are outgunned, you can pass a law to remove assault weapons off the street. Does that mean ATF, alcohol, tobacco, firearms unit from the federal government's going to knock on your door? Say, if you have an AR-15, could you please turn it in to give you $500 or $1,000? That's not going to happen. And in most situations, in most urban cities, the police will always be outgunned. Because somebody can jerry-rig a 9mm, now you can get an extended ammo clip or whatever to put in the gun to make it fire 18 or 30 rounds. I think part of it, and the pastor mentioned it earlier, everybody mentioned it, if I may, is where's the character and integrity? See, when you shoot at somebody and your intent is to kill that person, something's wrong with you. Okay. Does that mean that everybody has some type of mental defect? No. It's just some bad people out here. And I agree with what Jeff said a minute ago, or a couple minutes ago. The majority of police officers are good men and women. I know several police officers. I don't know one. When I talk to them, they say, I'm going to wake up tomorrow, I'm going to kill me a black man. They don't do that. They get into certain situations, and I talked to a couple officers one day, this was about 3 or 4 years ago. I said, let's say your shift starts at 8 o'clock and 8:15, you pull somebody over for speeding, or whatever the case might be, and that person is saying all kind of 4-letter words to you, and you write them the ticket. 8:45, you pull somebody else over, same situation again. 9:30, same situation again. At what point do you break? I think our expectations of police officers, they're not superhuman. They're human beings just like we are. And James, you're right, what type of training, and it could also come down to the equipment you're given, but what type of training are they actually given to say, you are now Superman or Superwoman. Don't pay attention to those 5 or 15 people who just cursed you out. And it's not even 10 o'clock in the morning yet. And they calling your mama all kind of things and your daddy all kind of things and whatever else might be affecting you. And one of those policemen or women might have just lost their mother. It could have been a week ago, or 2 weeks ago, or a month ago. And that one little word is what's gonna get
But
you snatched out that
again, I
car.
think we have this in so many different environments, and it's like when you go somewhere, you go to customer service, and they have a bad attitude, and I tell the people, I said, don't you know that they would have really appreciated, James, if you would have told them you were in a bad mood today and you didn't want to work. I mean, why would you come in under that kind of circumstance, right? And that's like the police. They have to be given the opportunity that when they're in a situation like this, that's when they should be put on admin leave, not after they've shot and killed someone.
Yes.
And so again, you have to really look at the system and what do we really want the police system to look like. A big part of it has to come from the community, right? And so you have to press upon the political leaders in these positions. This is what this community wants. But as long as people don't press upon them to do those things, what you said earlier, you and Carlee, when they do these things, they should have to be made to answer then. It shouldn't have to be a killing, a shooting, a death, a homicide before we get to city council and say, what is going on here? How long is this going to keep going on? And so when you look, you say, what is the design of the system and what's its intent and purpose? And so, like to James's point, unless we can get officers who are able to do these other things, handle mental health and all of those things.
But maybe it's also, maybe the police forces should be mandated to hire somebody that handles mental health.
But that's what I'm saying. The officer, and until we can do that,
Right.
these officers, this is training that they should have to do on an ongoing basis.
But
To some extent, I think. Let me say this one thing real quick, Pastor. The age. I do think that 18-year-olds, they should be allowed to be the police because they have that connection with those younger people in the community. And so I wouldn't rule them out. I would say that give them that opportunity and, because, I think that they should be.
Or at least fundamental, some type of program to where they're getting groomed into being a police officer.
Yes.
Where we're grooming into their character and into their integrity. But I do feel as if as far as the police, all of our emergency care people, they should have, and I'm not sure if it's actually hardwired into their program or not, but have somebody there that's dealing with mental health issues. And I'm not saying that they are flipping out. I'm saying they get so desensitized sitting out here, like you said, they have people just cussing them out, saying these things to them, or they get a call and there's somebody's kid over here that passed away, and they have to just deal with that. Nobody's looking at the emotional trauma that these officers are actually dealing with on a day-to-day, and they need to have these moments hardwired into their program where they go and have to go debrief, go and speak to somebody. EMDR is a great service. It's eye movement desensitization, and it's about how to fix the triggers. Make it so people are not so triggered about everything. But I think it's something that will really help dealing with our emergency care people, because you don't know what they have to deal with.
Right.
That's why police especially have such a high divorce rate too, because of all the trauma that they've.
Do they have high suicide?
Yeah, suicide and divorce rate. But what I wanted to say real quick is the flip side of what you were saying, Coffee, is that the police should not wait until a tragic incident, a shooting or what have you, to go on administrative leave or what have you. The community shouldn't wait either to come together and coalesce and as a community say this is what we want from our policing. But to be very honest with you, look at the apathy within the communities that we touched a little on it when we were talking about voting, but there's so much apathy out within and lack of knowledge within the communities that that it's not happening.
I'm going to wrap it up this way with one comment, and we're going to say goodbye to the listening audience. I was watching a recent city council committee hearing, safety committee hearing, and if you really don't have anything to do and you want to go to a free comedy club, just turn on Channel 20 and turn on YouTube. one of the council, and before the committee was the new monitor that was selected by former Judge Oliver. And one of the councilmen asked him, sharp brother, the guy was selected, very sharp guy. Who monitors the monitor was the question. Okay. And he said, well, that's my responsibility, because they were somewhat debating about the $250 per hour consultant rate, that they retain certain people to do certain things. And you're not gonna get a good work product out of quote unquote generalizing here an attorney or some other expert for $32.15 an hour. You're just not gonna do that. And the monitor pointed out he's a partner at a law firm, former corporate counsel in Washington, D.C., and former U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C. He said, I'm here at a reduced rate. Because most partners at his background, they're probably billing out about $1,100, $1,300 an hour. And that might be low. I'll give you his address and phone number later. So the one question that the councilman didn't ask was who monitors council? Because we can mention names of what has gone on, and I don't want to say Ken Johnson, and some other people. Who monitors council? And the councilman said, well, what I'll do, I'll just look at the individuals. So, and see, what's surprising is that, and I don't, the monitor's responsibility in the city of Cleveland is that he, in this case, is to brief city council twice a year. They have nothing to do with the invoices, nothing, absolutely nothing. And this particular councilman tried to make it into a dollars and cents issue as opposed to discussing the relevant issues about what's going on. And when I say Rizan, I'm probably going to pronounce his name wrong. I know I just did. They were asking him questions, and one of the councilmen said, you did actually read all those documents? And the guy said, yes, I did. And when he asked that question, nobody said anything about him or councilman sitting there asking repetitive question after question. If you just asked me how many people were on your staff, why would James ask the same question 5 minutes later? That means he's not paying attention. Or why are we paying him for that hour? The editor-in-chief of the Black News Network newspaper that he's going to develop. And I would like to thank, from my far right, Miss Coffee, who has her own program on Mondays.
Black Anthropy.
From 11 to 1. And we have Miss Everything, better known as Carlee, who has a program, a co-host with the editor-in-chief of the Black News Paper Network on Saturdays from 11 to 1. And we have Jeff Doggett, who has a show on this network called The Right Side that runs from 3 to 5 p.m. And we have James, the editor-in-chief of the Black News Paper Network. He's the co-host with Carlee on the Entertainment Plug, not Entertainment Club, that airs from 11 to 1. So
Excuse me, Al.
Yes.
The newspaper is called Urban Grandstand Newspaper.
Woo! There we go.
No.
Yeah.
No. We gotta discuss that.
Yeah.
No, we gotta discuss
Look,
that.
for now. For now.
So we gotta discuss
Gotta put
that.
a name to it. Gotta put a name to it.
Okay. As the kids say, whatever. I would like to thank the listeners for listening to the Body Talk radio program on the No Static News Network. And again, I hope everybody has a safe weekend, balance of the week. And again, do not forget to donate to Aaliyah so she can have a motorized wheelchair. You can go to gofund.me/50 small d077 small f3. Again, thank you for listening to Body Talk. My name is Ayl Bridges, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.
Some heavy, serious issues, huh?
No, wait, one of those goes to her.
For tuning in to Body Talk on the station where we don't bring no static, but we shouldn't bring the noise. NoStaticRadio.net. Make sure you guys check us out on social media where we absolutely love to hear from you on Facebook.com/No Static Radio LLC, on Twitter No Static _radio, on Instagram at the real _ No Static Radio, and on YouTube at No Static Radio. You guys can also check us out on our newest platform. We upload videos every week to discover.tv, not Discovery, that's the parent channel, discover.tv, where you can find uploads of this show and others. Just type in No Static Radio, all one word. And for replays of this show and others, check us out on Mixer or Mixcloud.com. Just type in No Static Radio in the toolbar for replays of this show and all others. And for continuous streaming, that means no interruptions, no refreshing, just sit back, relax, and let it rebuff on its bone. And you got us on tunein.com, liveonlineradio.net, or MediaQ for continuous streaming of this show and all others uninterrupted. And for all things No Static Radio, including up and coming events, merchandise, and a look at all our great show hosts here, please check out our website at www.nostaticradio.net. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And you know what it is. We got more music for your listening pleasure later on this evening. You can check out the Reverend Doctor with today's gospel music show. But once again, more music, enjoy the weather, be safe out there, and we'll talk to you later. Peace.
Can't be safe.
Yeah, I heard that earlier this week. What was it, yesterday? About the police. But they only